Hi, I'm doing this video mainly because I want to thank everybody that sees this that might support me on my GoFundMe.com. But I also want to give you some of my history. I don't know how long this is going to run, but I should have done this back December the 17th of 2019 because I had my 7-acre waterfront, 3,000 square foot home burned completely to the ground, and I lost everything. I didn't have insurance for its flood. I had only, I had flood insurance. I didn't have fire insurance because I was 400 feet away from a farm market road out in the country, and I never thought that this would happen. And so I got out with nothing other than the clothes I have on me and my two dogs. And with the blessing of God, I guess, you know, this was, I'd gone to bed at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And either the dogs on the bed woke me up or God, because I just walked around the corner and there's my kitchen, and the stovetop was just blazing all the way to the ceiling. And so we just got out. Couldn't get the fire department there to. So it was basically to the ground. I ended up having to sell just the lot off for probably a third or half of what I would have gotten. The rubble was still there. Um, so because of that, I took the money and moved 90 miles west to where I live, or grew up in a small town in Texas. And with that money, I bought this house, which I'm in right now, and got a really good price because the 125 acres that it sits on, the owner wants to get the house off. Temporarily, I pay rent for the driveway and the backyard. It was my understanding that because he was telling me about a previous renter that, you know, was telling him that, yeah, the water is hard, but he's still so upset because it comes from a water well and a water pump. Well, it turns out the water pump was no good. I took it back to the people that he had purchased it from. They didn't have parts, and it was going to be $1,000. So besides the price of the house, you know, and he had wanted a full year of rent ahead of time, and so I just didn't have the money, honestly, or just wasn't willing to pay $1,000 for a pump when he didn't understand that the word replacement is completely different, and it doesn't fall under the restrictions that he put on the deed, that I was in charge, responsible for the maintenance of the septic tanks, the water, and etc. So I couldn't see leaving $1,000 pump behind, because typically what I was going to do, try to find a lot in the neighboring town where I grew up. And while I was searching, I ran across a house that is 3 bedroom, one bath brick. Really didn't need any work. I was going to replace the floors because it had the 70s green linoleum, and it had a green sink in it. But after they were using air conditioning, refrigerated in air in the windows, and whenever I first started to light the pilot for the propane gas to the furnace, the whole unit flamed up. So I knew, okay, I'm gonna have to replace that. And originally I was going to rent that out, and so I got electricity, water, and all that. But because I just ran out of money and didn't have any renters yet, because I'd taken you know, I'm starting out with nothing, so I'm out buying uh, Walmart big screen TVs, new ceiling fans, and etc. that are on markdown, where they're flushing out their last year's model and bringing in this year's model. So, bottom line was, it's been 3 years, and I'm just stuck. I'd bought also with some of that money from the lot, and I was doing all this to try to help people because I could have put the money just in the stock market, which would help me, but I've realized, you know, if we're not here to help others, then who is? So I was going to do all of this on a sliding scale based off of income, just like the hospital does, because I qualify as low income, and I can go see a nurse practitioner and have X-rays and whatever, have spots, bad spots for too much skin damage removed, and they don't charge anything. Now, if I made more, they'd charge some, but still, it's great. And so, I believed in that. I believe in the golden rule. Uh, I'm a Christian, and I think that's the cornerstone. And I think everybody should do that. Uh, so that's what I did. But I'm hung up in a barbed wire fence, in effect. I've bought probably something like 9 used vehicles, pickups and whatever from an area used car lot. Obviously, I'm paying retail. But, you know, if I could, because basically for like your housing is only supposed to be about 20% of your income. Well, if you're out if you're renting out at the house to somebody that wife and kids that are making $100,000, they're going to pay more. They can pay more, you know, but I'm never going to charge more than that 20%. Whereas somebody that's making 20,000, that's a lot less money. And so I'm willing to put somebody in a better house, in effect, for the same dollar. Um, and that was just my mindset. And if I could break even or whatever, make a little money, great. So I'm sitting here. I've got 9 paid vehicles. I had to finance the last one, and I'm jammed up on payments. Uh, I was willing, because I know how bankers are. You know, the lower the risk, they're liable to give me a little better interest rate. I graduated from Texas Tech University and got an advertising degree. And so one of the things I should have done, and I'm trying to do now, is to reach out to any of the alumni of Texas Tech. I also was in a fraternity there, Gamma Chi. I mean, Kappa Alpha, I'm sorry. It's Gamma Chi is the chapter. So if there's any alumni there that's willing to contribute, I really would appreciate it, because my health has really taken a downturn. Uh, Pre COVID, I didn't have high blood pressure. I smoked some, but I had kind of pre hypertension, and I didn't have a bad version of COVID, but I did end up with what's called long COVID. And so basically, that's like taking a submarine sandwich, and one end, if that's pre-COVID, and the other end is your natural when you die. Well, it just chops out a big chunk of it and basically puts the two together in effect. And so, I don't know even how long, but now I've got high blood pressure. And a lot of it's due to stress and something. I'm running uh, a lot of days over 200 on top and over 100 on bottom. I mean, sometimes it's right close to typically what it's ER visit, because you start having organ damage. So I'm also, and have always been, ADHD, which, um, you know, I did okay with that. Very active in high school, coming from a small town, played all the sports. Was blessed that I got to start on varsity. at quarterback, running back, and split in the defensive end. You know, basketball and track and one act plays. I worked some part time in the summertime and full time because I paid my own way through there at Tech. I was averaging 33 hours across the 5 years that it took, and then full time, usually out in the oil field the first 3 years because the pay was so much better. So I'd had I've been a sales rep, a territorial sales rep for a national food manufacturer. I was in this territory. I had 21 counties, 75 grocery stores, and I had 2 direct accounts that I called on. I was spending 50,000 miles a year on my car, and I was calling on 7 grocery stores. And so my territory run was from all the way to the Red River, uh, like Wichita Falls, west to Snyder, east to Stephenville, and one of my direct accounts was located in San Angelo, but then I also went down to Sonora, Ozona, and El Dorado. And I ended up quitting it and started working just at a retail store, just to get off the highway after a few years. And I'd only been with them. They were a home furnishing store. The company, their headquarters is based in Amarillo. And so they decided to close some of their stores because their main line was ceiling fans in the summer and grandfather clocks in the winter. And then plus they sold curio cabinets, microwaves, pendulum clocks with the brass motor in effect. And so I basically opened up focusing more on ceiling fans, sales and service, in-home repair, and did that for 6.5 years, 6 days a week. And I was putting in like 66 hours a week. And, I knew I wasn't one of these guys that could just grind it out, that does 30, 40, 50 years. And so I'd hired a guy to be a manager. I'd bought a place 60 miles over on the lake, and that was where I got the waterfront property. And so, I decided to. He made an offer, and I'll tell you his name. His name is Mike Thibodeau, and so came in with one offer, take it or leave it, and it was 25,000 down, payments of $3,113 over 5 years, with a balloon note of 25,000. And I'd taken and put the business into a corporation, and mom and dad included, because without them moving money over, my dad cried whenever, and he was stone face. He was a great. You would never see him fight or anything like this, but whenever they moved money over to give me a line of credit and to the bank, and I had it paid off in 2 years, but he was happy to see that I finally found something that I could stick with, being ADHD. So I'd sold that the year before, and he'd retired at 62. Took early retirement because he had COPD and emphysema, but also where we moved to when I was 6 was 320 acres that belonged to my mother's parents. They had lived there. He had bought it in the 40s, and so they moved to another place, and so they gave us a place to live. But it was horrible. The work Dad had to do in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then come home and get on a tractor and plow till it's dark, and come in and dirty and tired and exhausted, eat some dinner and take his bath and put on his tidy whitey underwear and t-shirt and go to bed and just do it all over again for years. So a year after I'd sold my retail store, he had his heart attack in November at the age of 66. And instead of my brother, who lived 25 miles away and had his own business, be able to come over and feed the cattle, because back then it wasn't big rolls, it was still square bales. They asked me, which, I had this money coming in, and I loved my dad. So hell or high water, I was coming. They wanted me to stay a month, and I brought my old 9-year-old Cocker Spaniel that I'd gotten from a girlfriend, and here we came. And he said, well, what I owe you? And I said, listen, you just hang on to it right now. Because I'm getting this money. But, there's going to come a time, obviously, that you can help me. Well, Dad passed, and Mother, she's like, that's between you and him. So I never got paid anything for 15 years or more working there. There's 117 T-posts on the south side because the highway cuts right through it, Highway 380, and that's 320 acres, and the other half's 300 acres, and it's typically 200 acres pasture and 100 acres farm. And so I'll never forget that I was out there plowing on an old Dad's John Deere 4020 with no cab, and it's 28 degrees, and Mother realizes that and said, you go get him off. This can be finished later. So that's just the way it was. They need to clean out their septic tank. Oh, no child, no parent should ever ask a child to do that. But I did. That's just the way it was. So here I am. This is the house. I'll show it to you. This is built in 1957. There's some of the paintings and stuff that I bought at the used clothing stores. I lost so much weight. My adult life, I've always been 145 to 150 pounds. I bottomed out at 116. Of course, with this long COVID, I've got high blood pressure, really bad dizziness, which kind of came and go probably over the last 5 years. I've been able to a season to get up and go and doing this kind of stuff. I'm up and getting and stuff, but typically I'm a bobblehead doll. And it's just like, so I was spending 22 hours every day on the bed because that's the only time I felt normal. And as you can see, originally I bought this used furniture. Some of it's free, catching sales and garage sales and stuff. And I'm very grateful. I want to shout out to Mrs. Miller over at Rule. She was having a sale. And I was told by people over at the in Rule that go over there, there's some furniture and stuff. And by the time I got there, I said, well, what's the cost? And she said, buy one, get 5 free or something. And so she's the widow of Gary Miller, which I used to run around over there because I had the picture show. Of course, back then he decided he's going to run me out of town and took out, what we call a cheater pipe, which is made out of tubing, and decided to first poke it in the open window and hit me in the face and the nose and whatever. And then he just commenced just beating Mom and Dad's car to pieces. And so that's too much information, but I'm just going to show this stuff to you. So I've got these vehicles, and I've got some of them here. I've got them some at the vacant house that I lived in for the first 2 years. After coming here, I climbed in a window at 2 a.m. on Christmas Day, in fact. And so I'm going to tell you guys, my life has been an absolute shipwreck. Here's this room, and you can see you know, this house has to be moved, and that was my intent. But talking with somebody that can rent, that can move it, you know, all this has to be out. So basically, I just got it in here, and it's set that way ever since I've been here, which was about October of 22. Here's the outside. These are some of my vehicles. Some of these were personal ones, but that, you know, the pickups, the blue Cadillac, the Taurus, and the little Dakota, and there's also a I have a 2020 Equinox that I bought brand new. Now my Ford Fusion is 2012, and I bought brand new when I started the dealership, and it's only, well, it had 5,000 miles on it. Now it's got 14. So, but here's, and this is a great area. If you can get all the dead out of it, that's the Equinox, and that's a 4-door all-wheel drive Dakota. Here's the property, and you can see the oil wells and stuff. My family actually gets a cut off of those, even though they're not, that's not land, because we're the same people that drilled the oil well that we have on our property. They just group it all into a group, and they just take whatever the money is and just divide it up. It's a percentage. So I'm hung up, you know, like I say, like a calf in a barbed wire fence, and that's why I'm doing this GoFundMe situation. Basically, I have to do my laundry out here in rainwater, which it's nasty, but I can't afford to go buy enough purified water anymore to do anything but have water to drink for me and my 5 dogs. This kitties come up. I had one come up 2 years ago when my female, and I take dogs in, but my female had a litter of 8, and I didn't get the parvo shot like I should. I thought it was at 8 weeks, but actually it's 6. And it was probably, by the time they got sick, they were probably 14 weeks. But I had a kitten, and I guess it's from the neighbor, come up just like this one. It had a broken tail right on the end. And so I ended up letting it in the house, and I didn't realize at the time that they are carriers of parvo, even though they can't catch it. And I lost 7 of the 8. I took 4 to the veterinarian and only 1 in, and they gave me whatever they could, but even by the time I got home, they were dead. Well, 3 of the 4, and then the 1 died the next morning. So now this house, because it's built in 1957, has real hardwood floors, and then underneath it is shiplap. And of course, the exterior is shiplap also, and it has asbestos siding on it. This is actually 1x12s, and it's been routed or whatever, and then stained and varnished. Which is, I've only seen one other house in this area like that. You know, my